The Command & Conquer series is one of the most successful real-time strategy franchises of all time. From the original Tiberium games to the Red Alert spin-offs, the General's entries and beyond, the series has consistently produced some of the most exciting RTS experiences available, with a focus on intense action sequences supported by light base building and resource gathering elements. While the Command & Conquer games were a great addition to any real-time strategy gamer's collection, the series was never able to successfully cross over into other genres. Like the lucrative first-person shooter category of games, Command & Conquer Renegade attempted to bridge the gap in 2002, but only received a lukewarm reception, offering a mediocre single-player campaign with some fun but short-lived multiplayer. The Command & Conquer franchise seems like it would translate over to the 3D action realm perfectly. It has a rich, campy backstory that would provide the perfect backdrop for an over-the-top action game akin to the Halo or Battlefield franchise. And the series' strategic roots could lead to some innovative base-building elements in a first-person shooter game, especially in the multiplayer realm. So it was heartbreaking for fans of the series to discover that a very promising first-person take on the Command & Conquer games was cancelled shortly after its announcement in 2008, having been canned by EA Games. That game was dubbed simply Tiberium. Upon its announcement, Tiberium seemed like it would be everything that gamers would want from a translation of the venerable series to the first-person action realm. In development by EA Los Angeles on the versatile, powerful Unreal Engine 3, Tiberium would have focused on tactical combat from a first-person perspective. While gamers had experienced the CNC world primarily from an eagle's eye view in past games, Tiberium would finally let gamers experience the world up close and personal, using state-of-the-art sound and graphics technology that simply weren't available when Renegade was developed. While some of today's most popular shooters rely on heavily scripted events and a linear path for players to follow, Tiberium appeared to take players through the CNC world with a heavy emphasis on squad tactics, forcing gamers to think carefully before guiding their squad through a firefight. Featuring a simple set of squad controls, Tiberium let players micromanage their team of soldiers as they made their way through the game's various objectives and levels. The game also appeared to have a set of strategic controls with a wider scope than your typical squad-based shooter, allowing for some kind of control over the larger battle beyond what your team of soldiers was going through. Squads consisted of several classes of shooters, including genre standards like the standard rifleman and anti-tank units. But more unique units like the Orca and the Titan would have set the game apart from your standard squad shooter fare. The variety of squad and soldier types were designed to present the player with numerous tactical puzzles and challenges, as one had to decide which squads and units were best for each mission and engagement. The game also contained some light customization and RPG elements, letting players slowly unlock more slots for their growing squad. Players would have been able to discover powerful Tiberium deposits, opening up more opportunities for upgrades and expansion of their squads, weapons, and abilities. Coupled with the light tactical and strategic elements, players would have had a whole host of options for ways to tackle each level. Some levels we've seen gave players the choice of which objectives to tackle first, and how best to go about completing a level. The game's strategic level controls came into play here, allowing gamers to send other squads to tackle objectives or else have them support the player's efforts. Players could use the game's futuristic Battle Command unit to pull up a real-time strategy-style map and perform simple commands, like sending different squads to hold or attack certain positions. The Battle Command unit, or BCU, was poised to set Tiberium apart from other sci-fi shooters of its day. Allowing players to send different types of units into the fray, the BCU would have provided the challenge of a rock-paper-scissors style gameplay system. While the BCU wasn't a full-fledged real-time strategy game, it provided an extra layer of challenge to elevate the game to another level. This tantalizing blend of immersive action gameplay, squad-level tactics, and larger strategic choices seemed to feel right at home in the Command & Conquer universe. From leaked footage, we know the game was no slouch in the action department either. With widely varied enemies and interesting otherworldly weapon selections, Tiberium would likely have proudly stood shoulder to shoulder alongside any of today's science fiction shooters. The game's primary gun appeared to be the GD-10, a customizable weapon. At the push of a button, players could transform it from a cover-providing assault rifle to a devastating missile launcher. Sniper and grenade launcher modes were also available. While other weapons were visible in leaked footage of early builds of the game, we saw a heavy emphasis on using various weapon modes to accomplish objectives and take out enemies. Rather than switching back and forth through an arsenal of weapons in the soldier's inventory, players would have been challenged with using the gun's various modes to overcome the challenges in each level. Using advanced battlefield technology, players could utilize jetpacks to jump short distances, giving them the advantage on their enemies while assaulting hostile positions. Featuring epic battlefields designed to give players a real sense of immersion in a live command and conquer matchup, Tiberium also allowed players to storm the many fortresses and other structures dotting the landscape, entering buildings and bunkers to clear them of hostiles. Anyone who's ever played the storied real-time strategy franchise and wondered what was in those sprawling buildings and compounds would have loved exploring the massive levels apparently set to be included in Tiberium. Vehicles, especially wild futuristic machines like mechs, hovercraft, jets, and advanced tanks have always been a staple of the Command & Conquer games. While Tiberium appeared to include many of the series' typical types of vehicles, it was unclear whether players would have been able to drive or command any of these vessels. However, many sequences showed players riding in armored personnel carriers and assault vehicles, and taking cover behind hulking combat mechs, suggesting that some form of vehicle combat, however limited, may have ended up in the finished product. Players would be able to call in reinforcements throughout a skirmish, calling on dropships to descend in the middle of a battle and replenish squads that had taken heavy losses. This emphasis on combined arms may have resulted in vast, epic battles, much like the real-time strategy games on which Tiberium was to be based. Players of those RTS entries in the Command & Conquer series would have immediately recognized the frenzied, fast-paced battles right at home in the C&C universe. The game appeared to be heavily focused on its story, following the story of the armies of Ricardo Vega, defending the Earth from the Skrin invasion force as a soldier in the GDI during the raging Tiberium Wars. Taking on the role of Vega, players would have seen the entire war from the side of the GDI forces, interacting and clashing with other factions, like the Brotherhood of Nod and the Skrin throughout the game. While all footage of the game available is presumably from builds fairly early on in the game's development cycle, graphics and sound are both impressive, especially for games of nearly a decade ago. The game's engine was able to easily render large environments and keep track of your squad's progress all the way across the field of battle, while providing what was then considered a state-of-the-art sound and graphics experience. While most of the information we have about the game was focused on its single-player component, we do know the game was set to contain a multiplayer element. Allowing the players to take their squads online and fight in sprawling battles, Tiberium would likely have followed the trends of other popular shooters, like having players rank up and unlock perks throughout their time battling online. Of course, none of this was to be, as the game was canceled in 2008. Stating the game failed to live up to EA's standards, executives announced that development on the game had been halted. While it's easy to criticize this painful decision, sometimes game development schedules and budgets just don't pan out the way the developer and publisher envision, and then it's back to the drawing board. Although we don't know what's in store for the future of the Command & Conquer series, we can only hope that someday soon, EA will revisit the promising concepts that just didn't quite pan out like we'd all hoped with EA Los Angeles' ill-fated game. The franchise has been quiet lately, and we can't help but think it would be the perfect time for EA to shake things up and bring us something unique, wild, and innovative. Something like Tiberium.